Welcome to the 15th episode of the Rodin Pass, the Rodin Necklace, Part 1. In this very special episode, we're going to start planning the spectacular network of fortresses that will protect the entire valley from end to end on its northern side. This defensive line will earn the nickname of the Rodin Necklace, and these fortifications will be much more complex than the ones in the south, so we'll dedicate the entire episode just to designing them. And since these fortifications span two different regions, first we'll design the upper half of this defensive network, then we'll design the lower half, completing the full layout. And for this episode we're joined by Vivaldi's and his Concertos 1 through 5. Let's get to it! In the previous episode we developed the new farming village, leaving the terrain ready to create the massive fortress network on this side of the valley, the Rodin Necklace. And this nickname comes precisely from how narrow the valley is. It's a perfect bottleneck, and this is the necklace that protects that neck. Every ornament, every jewel, every link symbolizes a fortress, an essential piece of the chain that will seal the valley and defend our lands. So, without further ado, let's get started, beginning with this half of the fortress network. We'll make use of the location of the manor house, which already seems perfect to me. I would like the towers and palisades to connect with some sort of natural vertical wall, but the vegetation makes it hard to see clearly. That spot looks promising. The tower fits nicely against that rocky wall, leaving no gaps. When I say fortify the valley from end to end, I mean it literally. We're not leaving a single passable opening. That means pushing the game's limit a bit and doing some weird stuff with towers and palisades, but it worked in the south, so we'll take the gamble again. Let's hope nothing backs out. Let's clear some of the vegetation nearby to make designing easier. Now we'll build the main fortress in this region, which will include the manor house and its massive garrison tower. We're going to make the most of these mostly wooden fortifications, but I can't stop thinking about the incredible mega fortresses of stone and wood we'll be able to build once the experimental beta becomes stable and we can start the next series. The jagged look of palisades on steep slopes has never fully convinced me. It would be great if they smoothed that out a little. And with that, we more or less have it. On to the rest. Here comes the complicated part, the borders with the mountain. These are going to be a headache. Let's see how we solve this. Maybe it's better to close off this palisade section against this part of the mountain? As you can see, all fortifications will be double layered, since in this version nothing is sturdier than wooden palisades and towers, at least the defenses will gain complexity and depth. I don't love the idea of directing the defenses toward that farther slope, so let's try to close the double palisade in the original direction. Looks reasonably good. I always like connecting the towers with paths to give more of a sense of development, but the map limits don't let us draw paths beyond this point. Here we'll make a kind of redoubt, to segment the defensive lines and create resistance points. Later we'll probably build some structure inside, like a stable or something, to give it more presence. Adjusting the towers. And this steep slope under the cliff will be a challenge, but also an opportunity. And here's what I mentioned earlier, the jagged palisade on steep slopes. Though, to be fair, this slope is extreme and I get that it's complicated. That's why we'll adapt to the terrain and build along gentler inclines to avoid that horrible jagged effect. It's a bit like running up a steep hill, better to zigzag with smoother diagonals so your legs and knees don't explode in the process. Shame we can't draw paths up there. So yes, fortifying this slope is going to be a challenge. And those of us who've seen The Lord of the Rings, especially The Siege of Helm's Deep, know how important it is to properly fortify those tiny crappy streams where suicidal orcs sneak in with bombs and torches. So here we're doing it right. Something's missing here. I don't want a single stretch protected by just one flimsy palisade. And after several attempts, I'm going with this layout. We'll use the tax collector's office as a tiny military outpost to create a small fort hugging the rocky wall and adding another resistance point to the defenses. Having to adapt to the terrain sometimes leads to interesting creative opportunities. And this is exactly why I'm undecided about whether I would like to see some kind of terraforming tool or not. On one hand, it would be realistic in a very limited form. Medieval engineers did modify terrain, but obviously not like SimCity or Cities Skylines flattening mountains. I guess a very gentle version letting you rise or lower the ground by maybe 1 or 2 meters could add a lot of gameplay without breaking realism. But anyway, there are way more urgent things the game needs first. So it would look something like this. We would still need to add a few small buildings to fill the emptier parts, wells, stables, things like that. And honestly, I like what I'm seeing, a lot. So objective accomplished. Now we can look at it more clearly, without so many palisade nodes. And when we start building it in a future episode, we'll add some additional small tweaks. And if you have ideas, I would love to read them in the comments. They might inspire some interesting adjustments before we hit commit, which, by the way, will be a long process. The scale of this thing is huge. Anyway, let's move on the other half. First, let's clear all the vegetation where the fortifications will go. Done. Now let's see where we can place the manor house. Placing watchtowers on top of the cliff sounds extremely tempting. I just hope it doesn't bug out the fortress construction. But hey, we came here to build megacities at the limit of what the game allows. If this fortress is meant to be a strong point in the defenses, it will need another defensive layer. Oh, it kicked me out of the planner. We need to build the manor house before we can continue designing the defenses. Meanwhile, let's expand the village, which is actually too small for everything we're going to demand from it. We'll designate this work area for the storehouse so they gather resources quickly. What a delight gathering resources this way, much better than what I used to do. Another example of how much I learn from all of you too. Four more double households that we're going to need. Workforce will be in short supply in this region. The manor house is ready, so while we're here, let's collect a tiny bit of taxes. And let's continue planning. Even though, in the current state of the game, it makes no difference, it bothers me that the manor house and the garrison tower are right on the front line, so exposed. Strategically, that would be a terrible idea, so I'm moving them back to a second defensive line, where they will be safer. Besides, I think it looks better aesthetically too. And to ensure the courtyard doesn't feel empty, we'll add the tax office. I like it, and later we'll add some complementary buildings to fill it in a bit more. Now let's move on the longest section of palisades, which will cross the entire region. We need to move a few buildings from these crossroads, since it will be a sensitive point in the fortress design, the entrance to this whole defensive network. And of course, we have to design this part blindly, since we can't see the planner for the other region at the same time. For now, we'll try to line up the borders of both fortification halves roughly, and later we'll solve it by building the first region and then adjusting the second one so they fit perfectly. Let's expand the upper half fortifications a bit, making the layout feel more organic along the little stream. And we return to the other planner to continue this massive palisade and tower section. And here's the key part, the entrance at this fork in the roads. It won't be easy, but we'll design something tight and well fitted. Here we build the access to that space between palisades, which somewhere along the line will have a redoubt to segment and reinforce this long double-layer defense. Like double-ply toilet paper, but better. Not as soft though. Our goal is to wipe out the enemy, not wipe their butts. And there it is, this entrance section, reasonably well adapted to the road fork. Let's continue with the last bit of the palisade. Perfect. And essentially, that's it. Let's add a few details like that redoubt or small fort I mentioned earlier. And what's its purpose? Well, a defensive line is only as strong as its weakest point. With such a long double palisade without any obstacles along the way, a breach anywhere would expose the entire line. That's why we need to segment it, just a bit. Although, honestly, this is more for the joy of making it look sophisticated, because in the current version of the game, the enemy literally can't even attack palisades. So it makes zero difference. But someday they will, and when that day comes, we'll already be absolute masters of building fancy fortifications. Let's clean up this tangled mess of paths. And now that we've got it, let's take a calm look at the whole thing. I would love to know which design elements you like most, which ones you like least, what would you change, although I have to say I won't be making many additional changes, because I'm in a bit of a hurry to finish the series. I have mild panic that the beta will release into stable and this save will become invalid, leaving us unable to finish the Rodin Pass. I would lose my mind a little. So I'll be stepping on the gas for the next few days to get the footage ready. Editing and publishing will be another story. And with this, the entire Fortress network is now fully designed. Mission accomplished. But we won't end the episode without seeing the whole network simultaneously, even though it's not possible in-game. With a couple of screenshots and a little Photoshop, anything is possible. Here it is. And with that final image, we've seen the full project. Now it's time to make it real. In the next episode, we'll gather the enormous amount of materials needed, not in one, but in two regions at once, to build this monstrous multi-region defense network, and together with the southern fortresses, it will protect the entire valley, no gaps, no weak spots. So, what did you think of this fortress network design? If you have any ideas or suggestions, I would love to read them in the comments. See you in the next episode!